but he's like, I know who you were in prison. Like, you're a big deal.
Oh, that's what I got. So how about you, John? I don't understand what yours is about at all.
Well, George, you mentioned on the last episode, I think, you were talking about my affinity for documentaries, and any documentary I can find, I pull in. I pulled in one from 2020. And so this is a documentary about Danny Trejo, the actor.
Okay.
And the film is called Inmate #1, The Rise of Danny Trejo. And I was just peripherally interested in this film. I never expected, not in a million years, that this would be the film that I wanted to talk about on the podcast. With all the different superhero films and things that are out there, I figured this would be, a bubblegum, eat it up, throw it away kind of thing about it's this actor and his life and history. I was wrong. I was really wrong. I don't know how much you guys know about the history of Danny Trejo. The only thing I kind of knew was he genuinely was in prison.
Right. I knew that.
After he got out, he started getting work as like a stunt guy, and he started getting more and more acting roles. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what I thought this was going to be. Like, I get to know it's a feel good about this guy, redemption story. And it is that, but it's that on steroids over and over. It's a little longer than you expect for a documentary. It's like an hour 50. So it's not fluff,
2 hours.
Too. It's packed. Yeah.
Holy cow.
And you learn some amazing things. I mean, it's worth watching. So I'm not going to tell you everything. A lot of people probably know some things, but you learn about his upbringing and like the first half of his life in the 50s and 60s when he was in prison. Effectively, he lived the life of a gangster, a criminal, a violent offender. And when he was in prison, he was like a prison block boss. Like nobody messed with him. He was a boxing champion in prison. He was amazing. And they even there were people that he knew in his old life and his new life now that talk about, people see him on the street still and they're in awe, not because he's Danny Trejo, the celebrity, but he's like, I know who you were in prison. Like you're a big deal.
Oh,
and like there was all this kind of like imposing kind of persona that he put on to survive this life that he led. And then when he got out, there's this transition where he started getting little gigs and little jobs and explain how he got into work. And just when you think the movie is over at about a minute 10, minute 15, it fades to black. And you're like, what a great feel good story. And then it comes up from black again. And you start to learn more about his life and how he gives back and how he goes out of his way every time he can to speak to people who are in prison, to speak to at-risk youth. And this is not just lip service. I mean, this is going out of his way. They show a scene where he's going into a prison to talk, and it's this traumatic thing where he's being frisked and the metal detectors and everything. And this guy's saying, I wouldn't go back through that for $1 million. Like my life was, when you get out of prison, you don't want to go back, but he goes through this to go in and talk to people at his own expense, at his own. And then you're like, well, that's amazing. And then it dips to black. You're like, well, it's finally over and I feel really great. And it comes out like twice more with more humanitarian philanthropist stuff. At the end of this film, I already liked Danny Trejo, but in my opinion, he was just kind of like, he's a fun character actor. He's like a Sam Jackson, right? He's like a Latin Sam Jackson to me. He's like in lots and lots of films. He has a certain character and persona. He has a great look. And that's all true. But I have such a new respect for him coming out of watching this. So if you have a passing interest in Danny Trejo, man, will this up just your knowledge and your opinion of what he's gone through and how he's earned where he's at.
Well, I mean, honestly, whenever I think of Danny Trejo, the first thing that pops in my head is
machete, don't text.
Of course.
That's like the first thing. I mean, I knew he did some stuff. I mean, I knew that he did, but like, do they go into like why he got into the whole crime? Like, I guess it was 100%. Upbringing, and they
talk
cover
about
all that stuff.
His youth and his family life and how he kind of fell in with his uncle and how he worshipped his uncle who was a drug dealer and a heroin addict and wanted to be like him because that's what it was like in his little neighborhood.
Oh, so they didn't like whitewash it at all, though. They just said
nothing sugar-coated.
No sugar-coated? Wow.
No, yeah. So I know, George, you enjoy documentaries, but not every one of them, hit or miss sometimes. If you're looking for one, you could certainly do way worse than it's about movies. It's about an actor you probably know and respect. And it's a human feel-good story. It's like you'll come out of it going, wow, this guy literally not just turned his life around, but he believes he is paying a debt that he owes to people to try to help. And I genuinely believe coming out of that that's really how he feels. And it makes me have a whole new respect for the man.
Very cool.
Really good stuff. So it's worth checking out. Inmate number one. And by the way, they call it that not because that was his number, but because for many years they said that he was not a named character. He was gangster number one, inmate number one, whatever. In the script, that's all he was. Guy who yelled. That's all he was. And now he's a name.
Nice.